Hey everybody! In today's video, I'm going to do this magical colored pencil scene and kind of walk you through how I go about coloring on Kraft cardstock, black cardstock, anything other than white cardstock. As you can see, I have stamped the image in unicorn ink to show up against this Kraft cardstock. And you'll see me color each area of this with a white pencil before adding color. And I do this in 99% of the areas that I'm going to color on a dark cardstock. What this does is give the colored pencil kind of a luminous quality, and it makes it look more vibrant against that dark cardstock because it puts a barrier of white between the color of the cardstock that you're working on and the color of the pencil that you're using. But it really does give quite a few light effects as you're coloring as well, and adds just something very special, I think. You'll also see that I like to mix colors when I am doing something even simple like a fox, that you would look at a fox and you would say, well, a fox is rust colored, right? Or red or gray or whatever color the fox is. But here I've used a dark brown pencil, a yellow pencil, an orange pencil, and a kind of a reddish brown pencil all mixed together. And so when the fox is finished, you're going to see that he's actually really, really colorful. Even though when you sort of just quickly look at him, he just looks like a red fox. It adds a lot to mix your colored pencils with each other. Now for his little feet, the foxes around here anyway have these darker feet. I'm just using a layer of white and then a layer of dark brown. And I'm not doing a lot of mixing on those. On the darker colors, you really don't have to. It's completely up to you, but this is a very simple part of the fox, and so I'm just adding dark brown. Now, I also do one section at a time, especially when you are working on an image where a lot of the image is the same color, so all of his fur. Then the little areas like this area on his head where kind of the fur overlaps the fur on his body. In order to keep those separate, I color them separately and I go ahead and add the shading before I fill in this last section. So you can see how I added a shadow underneath the fur that's against his body. So that helps me distinguish the top part from the body part, and it lets me keep those two areas distinct just like they are in the stamp image. Since I don't have the benefit of the line anymore because I'm covering it up with colored pencils, so this is essentially no line coloring. This helps me keep the general form and shape that the stamp designer created. Now when you're doing just a white layer, because you'll notice on my colored layers, I'm doing 4, 5, 6 layers with very light pencil pressure to add all those different colors and blend them together. But when you're just doing a white element, like these beautiful little flowers, they look like lily of the valley, or on the white areas of the fox, you'll need to do several layers of white. So just like I put down multiple layers of color, you also need to put down multiple layers of white to get it nice and opaque. Now on the mushrooms, I am adding white around the spots, which will eventually be white, so that I can fill that all in with the red color that I'm choosing. And that way, when the spots are left uncolored, it's very easy to find them and fill them in with white. So you sort of take a reverse approach. If you have something on your image that's white, because you've used white ink and a white pencil to start with, you need to really define those white areas before you get started on them so they don't get lost. So this is kind of a classic mushroom, which is going to be red. But in order to create that look, I'm adding a bright orange, a yellow in sort of a highlighted part of the mushroom, and then a nice red. Keep in mind that even though you have put down white colored pencil, You're still going to get a little bit of that warmth from the Kraft, and so sometimes you can compensate for that by using very bright colors, which is what I'm doing here. Because this mushroom in this adorable set is really the star of this show, along with the fox. And so I really wanted it to stand out and be bright kind of on its own. Now, purple is the perfect shading color, even if you're using like a bright orange here, even if you're shading green. It is a beautiful, beautiful shading color, and I use it often. I'm adding a little bit of dimension to the spots by adding that same purple underneath them to kind of make them look almost like they stand out from the mushroom a little bit. And then again, you'll have to go back in to the white and add numerous layers to make them really bright. And then I always like to blend a little white over the top of any highlighted areas. You saw me do that with the fox. That's like a last touch, a last layer to add light to my work. Now I'm coloring this other little mushroom. This is all one image, one stamp image, this little mushroom scene. And so I'm going to make this one mushroom similar to the larger one, like a little brother, sister. And then the other mushrooms will be a different color. So I'm choosing the exact same pencils that I used on the first mushroom, adding the little highlight with white and adding the little spots. Now for the foliage, I also start with a white that's going to make these leaves really bright underneath the green. And then I'm adding sort of a kind of a brighter olive green to the leaves that I'll go back and add a little bit of shading to. But what's fun about this image is it's basically a masked image. So it's a simple scene, all of these images in one scene, but they're placed in front of and behind each other like you would do with masking. And so there's plenty of places where little pieces of the foliage are sticking out from behind something, and that just adds a lot of interest. Now on the leaves, I just like to make them a little bit darker kind of at the base. As I said, the mushroom is really the star of the show, so you don't have to put a ton of detail into the foliage. And I am adding just a little bit of gray shading, kind of where the bell of that lily of the valley looking flower would be curving kind of towards your eye. And that adds a little bit of detail. On the stems, I just make sure my pencil is really, really sharp. And I just go over them really once or twice. You don't have to spend a ton of time on those. For the sort of structural parts of the mushroom, I went with neutrals. You could use brighter colors here if you want. I wanted these to be somewhat realistic. It's still amazing to me that these red and white mushrooms exist in real life. They really do. And so they're realistic, and so I thought the stem areas should be realistic. Underneath the mushroom cap, I'm not really adding back in all of the details from the stamp image. I'm really more trying to give this sense of darkness and shadow underneath that mushroom cap. So I just kind of flick in a few of the lines, not worrying about if they're true to the original stamp image or not. You do want to make sure that your pencils are really, really sharp every single time you use them. It makes a big difference in how your colored pencil work comes out. Now the bottom part of the stem is just going to be a slightly darker brown. You can leave some of the little white edge of the stamped image kind of sticking out if you want as a highlight. It's like a natural built-in highlight since you've used white ink. Now these other little smaller mushrooms, I'm going to make them kind of a warm color. I don't really have that color present other than in the fur of the fox yet, so I wanted to add like a little bit of gold to this scene, sort of like a sunlight color, just to contrast with the other colors. Now this little mushroom has some stripes, so I'm going back in with kind of a dark orange there to add those back in because I think that's a really fun detail from the stamp. But I'm also adding white highlights on each of the mushrooms because that gives you the sense that there is light shining in from somewhere. So these stems will be white, again, contrast with the larger mushroom and those darker stems. It's all about just going back and forth. So here's what it looks like close up. You can see the sheen from the wax of the pencils. By the time they get that sheen, you know you have enough layers down on the paper. After that point, it becomes a little bit harder to blend. I find that it's usually 5 or 6 layers of pencil that gets me to where I want to be with colored pencils, and it's sort of the point where you can stop blending them. So here's what the finished card looks like. I paired it with this adorable fox with some masking. Head over to the blog for more information, and thanks so much for watching.